Hasan, Malcolm, Tommy, and I thank you guys for coming on.
Yeah, crew.
Very excited. This is.
It's amazing you guys have never met.
No, we've never formally met. We've spoken on the phone once though.
You guys should set the scene a little bit.
Should we set the scene? Yeah, sure.
We're in New York City. We're Upper West Side right now.
Hell's Kitchen, yeah.
Hell's Kitchen,
yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And
Patriot
we're at
Studios.
your studio.
Yeah, this is our studio.
Patriot Studio.
Yeah.
So, and for context, we played the Bulls at home last night. Flew to New York, and we're playing in the Garden tomorrow. I have to ask one question. So, in my life right now, part of my role on the Pelicans is to be this mentor. And as I get closer to the end of my career and I think about what I'm going to take with me, it's relationships and sort of the people that have mentored me and hopefully the people that I get to mentor and they go on to have sort of long and lasting careers. So just a question for both of you guys, but who were sort of the mentors that had a huge impact on you?
I don't think I had mentors. I had peers who were much more important. People going through the same things that I was going through, but maybe half a step ahead, or with a perspective I didn't have.
You're talking about like your class, so to speak.
Yeah. So the most important person in terms of the two people in terms of my career development were my best friend in high school, who was continues to be the smartest person I ever knew, and then this guy, Jacob, who's my business partner now, who I met when I was 22 years old, and who is the reason I'm in journalism. It was never.
What's the science behind meeting a Jacob? Because I firmly believe finding the Jacobs of your life, those are the game changers.
It was total
game changers.
I don't think I have a Jacob.
You never had a Jacob, like a friend or a coach who, while you were in Roanoke, you were in Virginia, who was like, "Hey, work out with me junior year," and you saw like a significant.
I had a Ryan.
Yeah, like somebody who was like, you're at this level, but us together, I'll take you here.
I got you.
So that's what Prashant is for me on this show, who's the co-creator and head writer on this show.
Yeah.
Without him, there's really a cap to my ability.
Yeah.
And the way we accent and complement each other, my ability to communicate like just the raw emotion of what I feel the story is, and his ability to just be an all-out nerd about it. Those two things are important. You have to have like the head and the heart behind the show.
Yeah.
But that's luck. Like I met him 12 years ago and
total luck. Yeah. I also wonder about the thing about mentors are useful and useless in exactly the same respect, which is they're useful because they have a lot more experience than you and they've been through a lot more, but they're also useless because their experience is necessarily going to be different from yours. And all they can tell you is about the way things were, and not the way things are going to be.
So you feel like wisdom can't be passed on from an OG?
I just never been that impressed by.
So Stephen King tells you have another 30 books in you. We talk about being prolific.
Yeah.
So you got what, like 5, 6 right now, right?
Yeah, Stephen King's a perfect example of this. Stephen King
wouldn't drop you a jewel.
He can't give you any advice because he's on a different planet. He's like, it would be like me going to ask, LeBron.
Is that the whole thing when people like my friends that I went to high school with, or they'll send me a YouTube video to be like, what LeBron eats in a day? And I'm like, really? You're a paralegal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, but you want to know what LeBron James
this is also the one basketball
eats in a day.
The one basketball connection is this is why, for the most part, and there are a few exceptions, the best players are not necessarily good coaches because they can't. They don't know how to pass on what they've done.
But you know what, Malcolm?
I think
I'll disagree with you a little bit.
I'm just going to disagree a little bit too. But I would say there is stuff that I could pass on. The players that are receptive, or let's say a coworker that's receptive to my version of wisdom, then has to be smart enough and intelligent and emotionally intelligent enough to then make it their own. And there is some impact there.
Yeah.
And I can say from my own experience, I'm not saying what I've passed on, but what I've received and made my own has been extremely beneficial to me. And I wouldn't have had that if it wasn't for a guy like, let's say, Rashard Lewis. I wouldn't have had it.
He mentored you.
Yes.
I'll give you 2 examples. So I kind of agree with what you're saying, where sometimes the hard advice itself may not be it, like the note, but the note may be in just you getting to observe them. Like just to see how a great person moves. Being around Jon Stewart changed my life.
Yeah.
Watching him move in the news media landscape, which is disgusting, ethically, honestly, and be funny and have a ton of heart and like be able to raise a family and be able to tap out to Hollywood. Like Hollywood didn't beat him. He said, I'm done. And for me to just have Spike Lee seats to all of that, just to witness it right there in the office, he didn't give me a ton of hard notes, but just a lot of the things I observed helped shape decisions I make even today on the show.
I guess I would make
a little bit of that.
There's an important distinction here between technique and those kinds of lessons, and a separate set of things about your particular creativity or craft. So to use comedy as an example, as you know, the things when you listen today to a comic of 20 years ago or 25 years ago, some of it's funny and some of it's like,
it didn't age well. Yeah.
So you can't say I'm going to be like George Carlin, because George Carlin's humor doesn't work in 2020 in the same way it did in
Sure.
But you can abstract some broader lessons about how to conduct yourself in the world from people at what generation.
But even Carlin, there's a couple things you can extract. Yeah,
but
sure.
In the same case with you, if I was an 18-year-old playing for the Pelicans, I would be very interested in having you teach me how to improve my outside shot. Right? That's a constant. That's not. We're not going to shoot from.
JJ, that's the one thing I've never understood. How you have there's so many freak athletes in the NBA that cannot shoot. And I'm saying this as a weekend warrior. Like I didn't go far in life in basketball at all. Like I'm all about butt slaps and high fives at 24 Hour Fitness, but I've been that my whole life. But picking up a jumper is I'll never be able to dunk, but being able to shoot, there were summers where I was better because I was just doing more of it. And I've never understood why certain players were never able to pick up a jumper, which is the easiest skill to pick up versus being incredibly fast or explosive. It's not the easiest. I don't mean it like that, but it's a tangible thing. Why is that?
I think mental. I think it's the hardest thing. Right, because
the mental aspect.
The mental aspect of shooting. Right.
But do young players come to you and explicitly ask you,
for form advice?
How do I shoot like you?
Sometimes.
And does it work?
Sometimes.
Can you teach them?
I believe in shooting coaches. Yeah. I wish more guys would come to me for shooting advice. It's happened a few times. We have a rookie now, Nickeil Alexander-Walker, who I love, and he basically just does whatever I do. And it's amazing. No, it really is.
Have you seen his?
Sometimes I'm trying to do shit on my own. I want to go work on my game. And he's like, hey man, can I come in the morning with you? And I'm like, yeah, man, why not? Tag along. Let's go.
How well
do you like that, or does that annoy you?
Well, he's no, I love it.
I'm sorry.
Oh, I love it. I had a guy last year in Philly, Landry Shamet, who was the same way. He's just he has been in and out of the lineup. He had a great game last night. He had a great game, 11 points, 6 assists, 4 rebounds. First time he'd played in a few games, meaningful minutes. He's going to be a stud. But has nothing to do with me. He's going to be a stud, though.
But can you watch him on the court, and can you see those bits of his game that he's got from you?
In terms of, he's a different player than me.
Yeah.
And he said something to the media the other day just about watching me and my preparation day to day and how that doesn't change based on the result. So whether we win, lose, whether I shoot 1 for 10 or 9 for 10, my preparation is the same. And he's like, I'm going to do that. That was my epiphany with a guy like Rashard Lewis. I just watched him be diligent and work day to day to day to day. And I said, oh, that works for him. That's going to work for me too.
And that's not an obvious intuitive thing for most basketball players.
No.
Why is it hard?
There's just too much stuff going on.
Yeah.
There's too many people in your ear. There's not enough time in the day probably for some guys. They got Fortnite to go to.
That's so sad.
They got to worry about getting a fit off for pregame.
That makes me so sad. This makes me deeply sad.
This is an issue. I really believe this. I think there's more.
This makes me profoundly
There's
sad.
more guys concerned with getting a pregame fit on Instagram than they are worrying about the win and loss of a basketball game.
Yeah.
I stand by that.
That's genuinely concerning.
It's very concerning to me.
Wait, and if you what are the principle, like if you looked at how much, for example, time you spend practicing and you compared that to that kind of average in the league, how much are you spending substantially more time working on your shot, or is it just how you?
I think it's efficiency. So going back to what we were talking about earlier about, mentors and sort of what impact they've had on me. So Steve Nash, I think going into his last year in LA with the Lakers, was building a house in Manhattan Beach. We happened to be neighbors while he was renting a place near me. And I saw him one day and I said, hey, can we grab coffee before I go back to Austin for the summer?
He said yes to a coffee?
Yeah, he said yes to a coffee.
People don't say yes to a coffee.
Oh, man, it was great. Well, I asked for a beer, but he was like, no, I got to go to a soccer game. So I was like, all right, that's fine. Coffee's fine.
Green juice.
I'll do coffee. But anyways, one of the things he said to me, I was asking him, I was getting ready to turn 30. And I said to him, hey, you're one of the few guys that just got better in their 30s. And, what did you do? What did you change? How did you train? Did you do anything differently? And the one thing he said was, I just shot less, but I shot harder. Meaning every movement, every rep was at game speed, and it was highly efficient. Mm-hmm. And that's how I've trained on the court. So it's like, I don't think I work more or less than maybe above average, but not more or less than anyone. But it's highly efficient.
Yeah.
And it's worked. And I've had my best career, or my best years in my career have been in my 30s.
Yeah. Deliberate practice.
That's awesome. That your best years have been in your 30s. That's like super awesome.
Thanks, man.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy that more young
also it's so
ask.
Cool. Like just like the way you're talking, it's really cool because wisdom is one of the few skills you can only acquire it with time. And so like just your ability to be like, okay, I've closed these doors. That's just not a thing I even explore. Like getting a fit off for the gram. That door is closed.
Yeah.
Like you trying to be
when I was 26.
You trying to be like the white Nick Young. You trying to get your swaggy peon. That door is like closed. But for you to be like, but to not see that as a weakness. Right. For it to be like, no, but I've doubled down on these doors, which are like far more important to me, I think is like the key. Mm-hmm. It's pretty cool to hear.
Yeah.
Yeah. You ever been given a piece of advice that was one sentence that changed everything?
No, although this is sort of a weird answer, but there's it dates me. Back in the day when Jesse Jackson was running for president, he had this speech, which I heard when I was very young, in which he would always have choruses in his speech, and the chorus was.
You're talking about when he would say something and then repeat it.
Well, it would be like he'd have it was a refrain.
A mantra.
It's a better mantra. Yeah. And the mantra of this particular speech was, he was talking about poor people in America. And his whole point was they actually work harder than everyone else because at the time, the whole notion was the poor were lazy. And the refrain was they go to work every day. And his whole point was the dignity that comes from that kind of persistence in the face of what you're talking about actually earlier. And for some reason that stuck in my head. I was 14, and I would listen to him like on the radio giving this. It was this campaign speech he would give many times, and I would hear him, and he would come to that moment. He would go to work every. And I've looked ever since that. I always looked around and tried to identify people for whom that was. My dad, for example, was someone I realized for whom that was the center of his. He was someone who went to work every day. He was a professor, math professor, but he treated himself. He sat at his desk at 9:00 and did not rise until he was going to have lunch with my mother. And then he sat in his desk and rose again at 3:00. No phone calls, no doodling, did that every single day.
No Twitter.
That same.
No.
Snapchat.
That was a huge kind of.
And he wasn't trying to get a fit off or anything?
No fit off.
That came later.
I always had this fantasy where I get to dress like a professor with like the V-neck and then the tweed blazer over top.
Did you ever want to be a teacher? Like go into academics and stuff like that and teach?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Wait, maybe you should start getting the professor fit off. And then walk in and everyone else is
add elbow patches to all my blazers.
JJ Redick looking tenured.
The next ABC Sunday game, just the
not lifestyles. I can't do the lifestyle.
What about coaching your kids though, right?
For sure.
Yeah, that's awesome.
For sure. My 5-year-old all of a sudden has started to like really get into basketball, and I'm a little worried because I don't necessarily want him to play.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's just.
Why is that?
I don't know. Just like the pressure
you don't want to go in your dad's business.
Yeah.
But there's so many current players that are in dad's business.
That's
like Thompson,
true.
Steph.
But how many of them, though, are not as good as their father?
That's irrelevant. See,
No. It's way easier. It's fine if you're better. It's not fine if you're a pale version of your father. That's hard. If you're Steph and you're actually better, that's fine.
Yeah,
that makes sense. Or Clay,
but it does feel like
I don't think that's.
It does feel like basketball.
The wise position.
It does feel like basketball more than other sports
you love.
Like think about a sport. They used to say this about boxing. Like there are no examples of a super successful boxer whose father was also a really successful boxer, because
Muhammad Ali's daughter is the only one.
Well, that's the only, but it's a different. Yeah, but like basically part of it.
Floyd's dad was not a successful boxer.
No, and part of it is because the mentality you have to be a successful boxer is you have to grow up with sort of poverty and anguish and anger. And it's like, if you grow up with money and you're living in Malibu or whatever, it's really hard to like, it's not just a physical thing, it's a mental thing.
Yeah.
Basketball seems like one of the few sports where, I mean, we're talking about Steph, but like even the newer generation, like Greg Anthony's kid is going to be in the draft next year and he's going to be like a top 3 pick.
Yeah.
Like there's all kinds of, it's just kind of a luck of the draw.
Everybody's got like a personal coach now at the age of like 12.
Right.
Yeah.
Which is crazy.
Training with.
Yeah.
Like Tyler Hero has had a coach since he was like 12.
That's
right?
crazy.
Yeah.
Wait, was his father a professional athlete? No,
I don't think so.
I think he was like maybe in Europe or something. He played somewhere, but not in the. Not.
But I can imagine, JJ, when you were 12, because we're the same age, you weren't practicing the way I was when I was 12. Like, let's go to.
No, you asked me this on my podcast.
Oh, yeah.
I had a key to the gym.
Okay.
And that was before school, and I'd go shoot
that
by
was his
myself.
10,000 hours. You got to
By myself. Yeah.
Nice.
The janitor would come in. Sometimes he'd rebound for me, but other than that, it was just me by myself.
Wait, who's an example of an NBA player who's not as good as their father?
An active NBA player.
Oh man, I don't want to say this because he's a good player, but Tim Hardaway, right? His dad, borderline.
Gary Payton's kid.
That's hard. Those guys are in a tough position.
But you know what? At least they made it.
But it's like, you're in the league. Like, it's kind of a cool.
I mean, I see you say that. Getting back to the Jordan thing for a second, Jeffrey and Marcus are both like great, sort of successful guys.
Yeah.
But like, that's really tough. It's like your dad's Michael Jordan. It's like almost, I think Jeffrey's even talked about this, and he's not particularly tall. I think he's only 6 feet or 6'1" or something like that. You almost like don't want to play basketball. Your father can just do something else because you just
investment banking. That's what those guys should do.
Venture capital.
I work at Goldman.
We were just talking about random NBA players, by the way.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think you wanted to add something.
Well, this is my question. The context of this was Hasan and I went to a Knicks Wizards game maybe December 23rd, a couple days before Christmas.
Yeah.
And obviously John Wall is not playing. Isaiah Thomas was suspended.
Yeah.
So with the exception of Bradley Beal, the Wizards team, and we all follow, everyone at this table follows the NBA pretty closely.
Sure.
The Wizards team was completely anonymous. Like it wasn't players like, oh, I remember them from college and I didn't realize they were in the NBA. It was guys that we've never seen their face, never seen their name, anything like that.
Yeah.
And the thing that I was sort of interested in, and we were talking about this a little bit at the game, is like, think about all these great sort of collegiate players who never make it to the pros because it's just too tough. It's just the pros are just a different level.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of like, where do these guys come from?
To me, what I found the most interesting about that is also the spread of talent, because we're roughly the same age. And do you remember, like growing up when you played NBA Jam and you picked every team you could identify the 2 characters that are on each team?
Yeah.
Where you're like, oh, Charlotte, it's going to be Muggsy Bogues and Larry Johnson, or Muggsy Bogues and Alonzo Moore. They were actual like tentpole players. And everybody's so transient now, you kind of don't know
who's on who.
Who's on who.
People don't know that I play for the New Orleans Pelicans.
No.
They really don't. I was actually...
Do you feel bad for young kids who tell, like, do you remember your first champion jersey that you had your parents buy? Remember,
like the starter jacket?
Yeah.
It was actually a Charlotte Hornets starter
jacket.
Exactly,
which was like the shit in the 90s.
I was on Basketball Reference. I've been doing a deep dive on the 90s Bulls lately, like watching old YouTube clips. And I was looking at their roster, and like everyone on their roster was between the ages of like 26 and 34. And then for context, I looked at my own roster on the Pelicans.
Yeah.
And everybody's like under 25 with the exception of like 4 guys. And I feel like that's all across the league, right? And I think that's part of the reason.
How old are you?
I'm 35.
35.
Yeah. I think that's just part of the reason you're seeing more and more guys that maybe you don't recognize as much. Like, truthfully, I had no idea at the start of the season who Duncan Robinson was.
I was waiting for you to bring him up.
And he is amazing.
Really good.
He's really amazing.
Is he the first? Did he go to? He went to Exeter.
Williams. He went
Did
to
he go to
Williams.
Exeter before
I think
that?
he went to Exeter, and then he definitely went to
private
Williams.
school kid
Yeah.
who goes
Division III.
But isn't Exeter one of like the most prestigious private schools in the country? Like the most number of presidents have gone to Exeter. And
not for
stuff
their
like that.
basketball. They're not known for their basketball team. Let's just put it that way.
Mark Zuckerberg went to Exeter.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. And Williams actually went to Williams for the first time in the summer. I had no idea it's the size of. It's a postage stamp. I mean, it's like I could make the basketball team at Williams if I
Isn't it just if you're over 6'6",
yeah,
and you have some coordination, you just can play basketball?
What do you mean it's that small? Like it's smaller than some public high schools?
Tiniest school. Yeah, school is smaller than some
It's
public
like
high schools.
1,900 students.
Yeah,
total.
it is
wild.
Absolutely the case. It would be harder to make varsity at many high schools in the United States than it would be at Williams.
Yeah, and he's good.
And he's good.
He's really good.
He's great.
He's like legitimately like. There's some stat you're also on this list.
Oh, effective field goal percentage.
Yeah,
for jump
and there's
shooters
only like
with
4
more-
guys
yeah.
in the league that are on it, and he's as a rookie.
It's like me, Joe Harris, him. There's one other guy.
How do you feel about those numbers when that's a new thing? PER and all that stuff. Like,
PER is very misleading.
yeah. Is it the same way comedians feel about Twitter?
Like
You know,
in terms of followers, engagements.
Yeah, and like people who have hot takes, people who are quote unquote funny on
Yeah.
Twitter, like that sort of thing.
You mean, wait,
Yeah.
comedians don't think that being funny on Twitter is the same thing as being
It's not the
funny
same
in
thing
real
as being funny on stage at all.
life? Yeah. No, I can see
Period.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Twitter's its own micro universe.
Yeah, it's its own like thing. It's like saying
And
like
there are very few examples of people that have actually transitioned comedically from Twitter to real
live
life,
performance.
right?
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
Jesus Amiro did it kind of, but they're just an exception to the rule because they don't claim to be stand-ups.
Right.
They just talk
Yeah.
shit.
Yeah.
So that's just they're just good at talking shit.
Yeah.
Don't you?
But wait,
don't
why
you
is
think it's
PR
hard to tweet? Like it's hard to tweet out something that's originally funny. Meaning, like to tweet out a joke.
Yeah.
If you're responding to something with like a meme or a GIF, that's
Yeah.
different. It's a
Yeah.
little easier to be
The
funny.
the problem is the arms race now for the hot take. Because there's just so many people
Yeah.
spitting out stuff at any given time, just the numbers of it, the chances are you probably have the same joke as somebody else.
Yeah.
Just the way it's like I had one literally that something funny happened, I had a quick take on it, and then a bunch of people were like, so and so just tweeted that, and you're like, oh fuck, it was within like 18 minutes of each other.
It's like, there's nothing you can do about it.
Yeah.
quick.
Whereas with stand-up or other live performance, the context of it, it's built into an hour. Like
Yeah.
it's very difficult then because what you're doing is the setup punch of a tweet is very like tiny in comparison to a stand-up run
Yeah.
that you would actually do on stage.
Is that part of why a lot of stand-ups are banning phones at shows?
Well, that's just so people don't leak your stuff.
But isn't that part of it? It's like they don't want you to leak your stuff, so I can take a joke you're workshopping. and
Yeah,
pass it
it's
off
just
as-
you're destroying works in progress.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Stand-up's the only medium that it requires an audience to get better at. Like you can shoot jumpers alone. You can go to the weight room alone. I have to start from ground zero in front of a crowd.
Mm-hmm.
So if you ever see even like the best comics after they've just put out an hour and they're building the new set, those first however many months back, it's rough. Like,
Yeah.
which is the most humbling thing about the art form.
Yeah.
You build the sandcastle, it goes away, and then you have to rebuild it again. And yeah, I mean, you get better and better at working within the bomb, but it's still painful.
So he's off of Twitter and used to be off of. You're still off of it, right?
Did you read
Or is
Cal
there-
Newport,
is there
Digital
another- is there a
Minimalism?
burner in the mix?
I did read
It's
that.
a great book.
So JJ for a while was off of
good.
all social media.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now he's back on Instagram.
But why?
Public
What do
way.
you get?
There were a couple of events that happened.
Uh-huh.
One, I got accused of being racist.
God.
Two, I got accused of harboring some sort of sex trafficking thing or something.
This is the
It
podcast.
was so ridiculous. No, it was so ridiculous. And then the third part, and probably more importantly, it'd been building for like a couple years.
Yeah.
Like I don't really need this in my life.
Yeah.
There's just a lot of negativity, and like the way the Twitter algorithm works,
Sure.
you're just being fed the same stuff over and over again. And I just lost interest. But I am back on Instagram.
Got
the
it.
gram kind of
It's
brought me
the
back.
pure way. Mike, you know
Yeah.
what my Twitter cure is? There should be a function where for a limited period of time, you can trade your entire Twitter feed for someone else's Twitter feed.
Mm.
Right? So
for a day, Malcolm Gladwell trades his Twitter feed with Laura Ingram's, so you get a whole different.
I get all of her. I live in her universe.
You live in her universe for a day,
but she has to live in my universe.
But she can't tweet for you. She just can see what you're saying.
So it's Twitter Freaky Friday.
It's just you just have to live in. So you know how Twitter's famously an echo chamber. This is the way out of the echo chamber, and you wouldn't necessarily have to be with people who you disagree with. I actually would be delighted to live in your Twitter feed for a day. I think it would be hilarious. I would really enjoy myself, and you would find out my Twitter feed is track and field athletes, car guys, and some like wonky academics. You actually might get a kick out of it.
Sure.
You learn a lot about track.
So it's Ian Bremmer and Jay Leno? Like it's just this interesting
no.
international policy wonk, dude who loves denim and cars.
It's not
That's Malcolm Gladwell's.
It's a lot. It's mostly the problem with runners is they don't tweet because they're
why
working on their craft.
They're working.
I had to actually get out of it. I don't do it. I have like our digital team does
when you make it big, that's what happens.
Oh, you're
no. I'm just too sensitive.
Do you spend more time on Twitter than you do on Instagram?
No, I don't do Instagram. Instagram, I did it for like 2 months and then I somehow got locked out and was like, what's the point? And then I tweet like...
Is Malcolm Gladwell a visual medium artist?
No.
Is that why?
No, I don't care about it. I mean, I tweet like once every 2 weeks. I only really tweet about like my hatred of large college endowments. And my opposition.
What's Harvard's endowment? It's like 50 billion, right? It's like insanely high, right?
Like that, yeah, something up there.
Wait, so you don't tweet anymore. But do you think that
what I'll do is our digital team, which is great.
Yeah, I can't believe how fancy that is.
No, and but you guys get big numbers. Like
you gotta
engagement's crazy.
Malcolm, you gotta have mental protection for this. This right here is my ACL. I gotta protect this thing. Because the amount of people that are attacking you, especially doing a political show, which in nature is very divisive.
Yeah.
It's gonna fuck with your head.
My Twitter feed is
not gonna be
people
healthy.
telling me how great I am. I don't
You don't get any negativity on your Twitter feed.
You've got negativity on my Twitter, on me. And I wasn't. So we had a thing, I would say maybe 6 months ago or so in New York. Yeah. We had dinner with Mayor Pete.
Okay.
And remember you were going to come and you had to bail at the last minute.
Uh-huh.
And it was
working,
me.
right?
Yeah, you were working, unlike us.
It's the greatest lineup of all time, first of all.
So it was me, Jesus Amiro, Charlemagne, and this guy, PFT commenter, who does a big... He knows. He's
and Mayor Pete. Podcaster.
And Mayor Pete.
It's hilarious. The photo. Tommy sent me the photo.
No, so the next day, like my whole thing was like, we did it because I knew him a little bit and I knew Liz who works with him.
Yes.
And she wanted to have us meet with him. But like the whole point was not for it to go public. Like nobody's endorsing him. It's not a thing that's
people
like...
are just hanging out and having dinner,
they're just talking. There's not any real objective to it. The next day I see Malcolm. We have lunch or something like that. We have coffee, lunch, something like that. And he just asked, like, what's going on? Like, what have you been up to in New York? And so I tell him, and then I tell him the list of everything. And he's like, oh my God, please tell me you took a picture. I tell him, like, we took a picture, but so he's like, send it to me.
So how did this get leaked? Did Malcolm leak it?
I walk out of the coffee shop, and Malcolm goes onto Twitter and just says something along the lines of, like, just post a photo with no context, and is like, this is why Mayor Pete has to be president, or something like that. And so for the next, 3 days...
You broke the code, Malcolm. You're not supposed to do that.
And the thing is, people on Twitter, the lefties on Twitter hate Mayor Pete. Like, it's almost like Trump. It's weird.
Oh, right.
It's weird. And so for the next 3 days, it's everything. It's like... everything, like every personal insult about us, like this short, ugly man meeting with Mayor Pete.
Do you want me to bring this back to the New York Knicks game? What he's describing has been something that I've been trying to break down in my own head. So this yelling that you see on Twitter in regards to, say, Mayor Pete, that being the case study, how much of that is intrinsically real versus not real?
It's not real.
Do you get what I'm saying?
Yeah. How
much of it of like, I can't stand Mayor? Are we talking about 5,000 loud vocal people? Or are we actually talking about a large contingency where it's like Michigan does not like Mayor Pete, Iowa does not?
It's tiny.
So that got me thinking. So my gut was the same thing. So I go, is cancel culture on Twitter a real thing?
No.
Because when we were at the Knicks game, Ja Rule was sitting next to us, and I'm like, cancel culture definitively is not real. This dude should be in prison for securities fraud, and we are dapping up at MSG.
He came in midway through the second quarter.
There isn't like I was like,
it's a great point.
What is
it's a great point.
You know, what is real and what is not? And I think the new cognitive framework we have to have, Malcolm, make it a chapter. I'm just alley-ooping you this.
I don't think it's real.
What is real and what is not?
It's like there's like 5 jackasses who spend all their day on Twitter saying nasty things. It's like you just have to get past that.
I wish there was another app and that was just, it determined a certain digital threshold.
Yeah.
You exceed this threshold and then, it is a real thing. But there has to be some sort of number. Almost like there's a smog meter when they're like, it's orange.
Air quality. Yeah.
Because it has been real in a few instances, right? An author or somebody says something and like, yes, they do lose a job or something does happen. There is like an actual real world, we live in the world change. Then there's just a bunch of stuff that's just like
crazy stuff.
Yeah, people are mad that Justin Timberlake's performing at the Super Bowl. That was like a legit thing.
Yeah.
But it wasn't a thing.
It wasn't. Here, there's 2 things to keep in mind. One is that a long-standing observation in any kind of field that involves people's reactions is that people who dislike something are obviously much more vocal than people who like it, right? You hear from the dislike. Yeah. The second thing is, and this is the rule of thumb I always keep in mind, which is the number of people who dislike you are simply a linear function of the number of people who are aware of you. So if you're a writer, so suppose you write a book, if you write a really good book, let's say 80% of the people who read your book like it.
Okay.
If you sell 100 copies, that means you have 80 people who like you, who never say they like you and 20 people who hate you, but it's only 20.
But the 20 people bought the book?
They bought it, they hate it, so they tweet, I hate it. But there's only 20 of them. If you sell 1 million copies, you have 800,000 fans and 200,000 people who hate you. You have an entire small city who hates you. And so you can go around.
So there's 10 million people on planet Earth that hate J.K. Rowling.
Sure. Absolutely. So when I go on Twitter and I see someone attack one of my books, I say, that's because I'm selling a shitload of books. This is fantastic. And the more critics I see them, I'm like, oh my God, my sales must be through the roof. That's all this means.
No, right? But there has to be a critical point where it goes, no, people are very, very upset, genuinely very upset.
No, because if you're somebody who's in the public eye, it's very hard to be bad at what you do. So most people who are attracting a lot of attention in the public eye, they're good. And most people who read books on the bestseller list like the books on the bestseller list. Most people who go to comedy shows like the comic who's,
sure.
So this 80-20 rule is
now. How does the president work in this function? Because I would say roughly 60% of this country does not like it, but there's a strong 35-40 in critical states that love.
Yeah, no, I think that's a separate. That's a
separate case. Okay, got
it. While we're into, I have to? Do you guys know? But I have to tell my favorite Twitter story along these lines, which involves the New Orleans Pelicans. Do you know this story? I read this on Twitter. This is the most amazing thing because it feeds into what we're saying. A woman who is like from a very religious Jewish family takes her son to a Pelicans game on Hanukkah. They're sitting in the stands.
Oh, this is great. I know the story.
Do you know the story?
Yeah. Was it this season? Yeah.
Yeah. And she hears people behind her saying, Jew holiday, Jew holiday. She's like, holy mackerel, this is so anti-Semitic. I can't believe we're here. She's turning to her son. Her son's like, what are you talking about? She's like, they're saying Jew holiday. She's like, no.
Oh my God!
Well, she figures it out at the end. At the end of the game, she goes home. She goes home and asks her husband, and he's like,
"Oh, I didn't know that."
No, she literally left there, and she was like, "I just had this horrible experience with these people at this game." Like,
she tweets.
Was she tweeting stuff out while this was going on?
After she figures out that she was mistaken.
Yeah, it was crazy.
It is so beautiful. Wild. But that's another beautiful part of this, which is like a lot of times when people get really, really. That's a hilarious example.
I don't know that I actually believe that story.
I totally believe it.
I think that's something she made up and thought it would be
because it would go viral.
I think people.
He was having a big game that night. Apparently, it all tracks. It all tracks.
All right.
What would have happened when you were in college?
That's a good mom story. It checks out for me. That's a mom story. Yeah.
I was saying, what would happen when he was in college? Because like, tell me if I'm wrong about this, but when you were in college, you were definitely the most hated athlete, college
America,
athlete in America.
Probably,
one of the most hated athletes probably in sports.
My sophomore year, I had to change my cell phone number like 18 times. That's not an exaggeration. I have no idea who kept leaking my cell phone number to Maryland fans. And so this was back before you could like set an alarm and leave your phone on silent.
Yeah.
You used to have to like set an alarm and like leave your phone on. And so I would just get calls throughout the night, 2 a.m., 3 a.m.
Wow.
JJ, you suck. JJ, you're the Antichrist.
You
like,
would actually pick up.
Yeah.
You'd be like, hello, this is JJ.
Why?
Well, I had to stop the ringing.
3 o'clock. It could be Coach K.
Maybe it was a booty call. I don't know.
We never figured out why.
You were the JJ Redick.
Was it
That's
just
true.
Duke? And
I think I was a smug, arrogant asshole.
But I mean,
that's why. And I played for Duke.
I thought it was the gel, and there was a lot of that stuff.
Did I wear gel?
Was it? Your hair always
Overall look.
It always looked wet. I kind of had
more
like
like
that.
I don't know.
Okay.
I think that
Spiked.
Yeah.
well,
What was the yellow can? You get it at Walgreens.
Yeah. It's for
It might
$1.
be spiked.
LA Looks.
No, it was after.
has there been a college player since then? Because Grayson had it a little bit, but it wasn't the same.
No, not the same
Grayson
as
was
JJ.
like legitimately like kicking people.
Yeah, he was
Like, doing things that deserved
Yeah.
scorn. Like I, on the other hand, I just felt like I was getting buckets and then just like talking shit, which is like normal for a 19-year-old to do.
Yeah.
And you know, whatever. If Twitter was around, I probably would not have had an account.
Yeah.
I don't know if you're like a 19-year-old psyche. It's just that wouldn't have been good.
Well, that's what we did one of these last week with Zion, and he's super just composed for somebody who's that age, and like basically got to be crazy famous when he was like 15 years old.
Yeah.
And it's kind of amazing. It's kind of amazing that like he's like, I feel it's the same thing with LeBron now. And LeBron's been doing it for years, but like think about like all of the challenges that like a normal 15-year-old has.
15-year-old.
And then you're that age and you have 7 million Instagram followers, and everywhere you go, you have this and this. It's like people struggle with that when they're 40. The idea of having that when you're that age is crazy, but I think it's only getting worse. I mean,
it's only getting worse.
Like the high school kids
it's
now
or good if you want followers. But like we mentioned Overtime. Overtime's a media company. They're actually based in my neighborhood in Brooklyn, but like they hype these high school kids up, you know. They show highlight tapes.
They're like hoop mixtape.
Yeah, exactly. Ball is life, like all those things. And these high school kids, they're 16, 15 years old, and they've got 675,000 followers. And like,
that is insane.
I do wonder, like, they've got that following. They have this whole, echo chamber, right, of people telling them that they're so great, and then they have to go to college for a year, or they go to the NBA and they're in a locker room, and some truth comes out. Like, there's going to be some negative effects to that for sure.
But this is my question. I was going to ask this when we were talking about the anonymous players, and we were talking about this at the game a couple weeks ago. When you actually look right now at a lot of the best, if you were to rank the top 15 players in the NBA right now, I'd say probably at least 7 or 8 of them, if not more, were not big recruits and came from small schools. So if you go to it's like Kawhi, Paul George, Ja Morant, rookie now, Steph, Klay Thompson,
Duncan Robinson.
But so there's actually not there are more in the top 15 who are not big recruits and were not big in high school or even necessarily in college than like the blue blood recruits. And so is that going to, doesn't that seem like that this is going to come to a head at a certain point where you're going to have some real, almost like there are all these tragic cases when guys were coming out at a high school and they weren't ready, where they're getting too famous, too young, and they can't actually play.
Yeah, but I don't think this is anything new. I mean, if you go back to like my high school class, guys like D'Angelo Collins or Lenny Cook, these guys were like really hyped coming out of high school. I think I spoke to the Duke team a few years ago, and like I used these sort of examples, but like when you are 15 and you appear on a top 50 list, or you get a McDonald's, you get nominated for the McDonald's All-American game, or you see yourself in a mock draft if you're a freshman in college. Like there's this sort of natural human tendency to feel like you have made it. And I think the people that ultimately survive and thrive are the people that never have a sense of satisfaction from any of that. There's a way to separate what's real and what's not real, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I think we maybe talked about this the first time you came on the pod, but just like for a comedian, sort of the hunger that you have to have.
Yeah, you always have to. The guys and gals that I really look up to are the ones that have such a hunger for prolificness. It's never been about the ebbs and flows of fame of show business.
Yeah.
And the ones that really, really have real careers, you know, like your John Mulaney's, your Jim Gaffigans, your Colin Quinn's, like these guys that have been around for a long time. You look at their body of work and, you know, that's when you start seeing Carlin had 18 specials and stuff like that. They're prolific.
He had 18 specials.
I mean, it's like...
right, because he was working well into his 60s.
Or like, you know, look at like Chappelle's legacy right now. Within the past 2 years, he's put out, he's put out 5 hours of material. I mean, that's insane.
Yeah.
And for it to be really, you know, say what you will about the content, but it's really up there. You know what I mean? So that's people like that just love it. They just genuinely love it.
Did you watch it?
I watched the Kennedy Center Mark Twain Prize.
That was great.
Thing. It was kind of great. It was you just reminded how insanely beloved he is by his peers, which is always kind of lovely to see.
Yeah.
I was listening to the Good Old Boys. One of their what season from Revisionist History was it? Was it this past season?
This past season, I think. Yeah, season 4.
So this episode, and I'm going to just sort of give the very brief description of it, but the overall question, which is sort of asked in it, is when is it okay to sort of give somebody a platform versus not? And it's in reference to Lester Maddox, who was the governor of Alabama in late 60s?
Of Georgia.
Of Georgia in the late 60s, early 70s.
Specifically to interview somebody, like to actually put them on the news, put them on the
Yes.
show.
And so, like, I'm sort of curious what you guys all think about that, about especially now, and this kind of bleeds into the Twitter question a little bit, but just where we are as sort of a society about at what point is your cosign more harmful than good?
Yeah.
It's interesting, man. I've seen 2 different case studies unfold, which had very different results. So when I was at The Daily Show, this is before the 2016 election, when we were sitting down with, you know, people at the Republican National Convention, the Democratic National Convention, Ronnie Chang, I think, shot a field piece with Richard Spencer, who's a white nationalist and like a very famous provocateur.
Duke graduate.
Duke. Is he really?
For the record. Yeah.
But he really is a Duke graduate?
But as we got closer and closer to...
Are you sure about that?
Yeah.
Stephen Miller is.
Yeah.
You have Stephen Miller as well?
Stephen Miller
He was in school when I was in school.
Yeah, it's terrifying.
I remember reading his articles in the Chronicle and being like, who the fuck is this?
Out there, yeah. But anyways, as we got closer to air, Trevor and the showrunner Steve Bodo at the time, you know, just said like, I don't think this is wise. And I do think this person is just saying this stuff to kind of have a hot take and for it to go viral. The show's being used more than us having like a positive conversation or discourse. I'll give you another example. Most recently, Andrew Yang, who started off very much as an underdog, still currently is an underdog, but has started to gain steam. Because he wasn't getting a lot of attention from mainstream media outlets, he was doing a lot of right-wing and sort of conservative talk shows and podcasts and doing incredibly well. When you look at like the comments, they were actually incredibly healthy and positive. And so I actually don't really have an answer on this because I've seen 2 different case studies where someone has crossed over, quote unquote, to the other side. And one example is positive and one example could have been very negative. So I think it's just a case by case.
I don't think there is a general rule. I think you have to evaluate. You have to ask the question, is this someone who is going to use this particular platform to enhance their, what is, you know, some nefarious end? Or is this someone who is going to use this, where the usefulness of this platform is the audience learning about this particular character in a way that they may not have? So if you think you're just going to give someone airtime to make them even more notorious, no.
It's not worth it.
But I know in my experiences with field pieces, I very quickly realized who's a good faith actor and who's putting on a performance.
But what about
pretty quick? There's a lot of
so with Patriot Act, for example, MBS. That's a guy that's also a world leader.
So those are things that you have to reckon with, right?
Yeah.
When you're dealing with an autocratic regime that's an absolute monarchy, at the end of the day, say what you will, that is the head of a nation. So their opinion and viewpoint is incredibly valuable. And look, anybody who I've had on the show, you know, I've been happy to say we haven't really pulled any punches. You know, when we sat down with Prime Minister Trudeau, I was very candid with him about everything.
Yeah.
You know, and
that's my prime minister. You know, I'm Canadian.
Yeah.
You were nasty to.
Have you seen this?
I don't think I was nasty, but I think I was. What I did is I just asked the questions and a lot of stuff that was kind of appearing in the discourse. Like I just wanted to be as real and as
believe you
authentic.
didn't see this. This was.
Wait, I need to see this.
The rule I've always governed every interview with is be as real as you are on the WhatsApp thread.
Yeah.
You know how we all have WhatsApp threads with like our home. Be as real as iMessage.
Yeah.
Like we all have the text message thread with our friends from high school and college where we're really who we are.
Yeah.
And my goal on the show is to be as real as that. Don't be disrespectful. Don't be rude.
Yeah.
But
Wait,
be real. Be authentic.
How did he do? Did he hold his own?
Yeah, and he didn't. I've been in interviews where they pull the mic and they walk out, or you'll have the advisor come in and go, last question.
Yeah.
He sat down for the full amount of time, and if I swung, he swung back.
Well, no matter what he does,
to give him credit, he was incredibly scrappy, and he was very much present and in the moment.
Yeah.
I'll give him credit. I've sat down with a lot of politicians, and a lot of them, when the blitz comes, they'll immediately call audible and they'll go into talking point mode. He was very much.
Keep in mind, there is nothing he can do that will make him more newsworthy or notorious than his own father and mother. His mother had an affair.
You're talking about Pierre Trudeau, right?
His mother while married to his father, had an affair with Mick Jagger.
Is this alleged or is this
it's
true?
so true. While
come on, now come, don't do that.
Come on, get the podcast soon.
So
this is an example, Tommy. This is an example of something I would not do if I'm sitting down with Prime Minister.
No, my point is
that's not like a good faith.
if my parents had conducted themselves as his parents did in the 1970s, I would be impervious. I would be like, dude, say what you want. I am small fry compared to what my parents were up to. His mother was dancing at Studio 54 at the apex of coked up Studio 54 days while she was married to the Prime Minister of Canada. She was like off by herself partying. I mean, like that's
Twitter, right?
Yeah, this is the pre-social media. It's a whole different world.
Media,
that's what he was raised in. There's no way he's going to get shaken by.
Speaking of 90s basketball, how pumped are you to see The Last Dance?
The Jordan
doc.
Oh, it's amazing.
It's crazy.
You've already seen it?
No, I'm so excited.
I watched the first hour of it yesterday.
That's what got me on the.
So you
I watched the YouTube dive.
Yeah, it's insane,
dude. I'm ready to put me in a diaper. I want to see all 10 hours.
It's 10 hours. So it's coming out.
It's the last season of Jordan's.
They filmed. Actually, Adam Silver at the time was the head of NBA Entertainment.
Yeah.
And so he and Klay Thompson's uncle, do you know that guy? Works for the NBA?
No.
Klay Thompson's uncle works for the NBA and works something for an NBA Entertainment. Uh-huh. They made this sort of brilliant call right before the season started in 98 to stick cameras with the team the whole time. And so they had 200 hours of footage that's never been seen before.
Amazing.
Basically, that's like the basis for the doc, and they turned that into basically that.
Plus interviews.
Plus it's the story of Jordan. So it goes throughout his entire career, his life. It doesn't do everything. They don't get to some of the stuff at the end, but everything with him on the Bulls. Yeah. And it debunks a bunch of conspiracy theories and everything like that.
I thought you were asking me about Julia Stiles' movie that saved The Last Dance. You caught me off guard.
I've seen that. We can talk about that.
Nostalgia, right?
Yeah,
actually, ESPN will be showing the Julia Stiles movie on off days.
That's counter programming.
Wait, what conspiracy theories surround the Bulls of the 90s?
Flu game was never a flu game. He was drunk.
Flu game.
That's a classic one.
I mean, but
they debunk that?
The playing baseball.
5 minutes ago, you were rolling your eyes around my well-researched observation about Justin Trudeau's mother, and now you're telling me the flu game he was actually drunk?
I'm a little old school. Talking about someone's mom and stuff like that is a little. Sometimes I get a little. Like,
his mother was a legend.
I get a little bit like you know what I mean?
So Canadian.
Gotcha.
She's a legend. But no, wait. This is you're levying quite a serious accusation here that the flu game was.
I'm levying.
There's worse accusations to be made.
There's a lot worse.
This is one of the most iconic basketball games of the last 50 years.
Yeah. But the accusation is just that he didn't have the flu, that he was hungover.
I know, but the whole heroic thing is that he was laid low via a virus, took himself off his hospital bed or whatever the hell he was, and goes out and scores. What did he score?
50.
But now you're saying he was just wasted.
I mean, a lot of 30. I mean, this is not just like let's not take this.
But I think it's just as impressive if he was hungover.
Yeah,
scoring that much hungover.
Now that's a great comedic take. Now you'd flesh that out into a run. You wouldn't tweet that. You would do that as a whole run. Yeah,
I don't think it's. I think it becomes morally a little muddied now.
I do think. I mean, this is just like a comedic take, but I do think like we need to start factoring that in. Like say what you will, his ability to be able to run without sleep like that and perform at that level while,
Did you see the
gambling
was it
and
the
the whole
Roenick
thing?
story?
Yeah.
The Roenick story?
I heard about
them
this. I didn't see
playing
it.
golf the day of the game, drinking beers,
Oh,
and then him going, and then he had like 45 on the calves that night.
I've heard like the dream team stuff. Like he would not sleep.
But this is another thing, the pre-social media, because he was by all accounts casino till 5 a.m. night before games, maybe not before the NBA finals.
18.
And then he would go play golf, and then he would go and score 60 points.
Yeah.
But that couldn't imagine if that happened once now. But just one time he would get destroyed.
Someone told me a story about him and Barkley the other day, and this is a story I believe because the person was with them, and it was the day before like a day game in Phoenix, and the two of them basically went shot for shot at some place in Scottsdale, and then they each had like 45 and 10 the next day.
That's crazy.
And it was like remember the NBC game?
Yeah,
in the 90s. Yeah, it was like the 1 o'clock NBC game.
Well, do we think they would? Do we think that?
You know how they have the combine, right? Where they're like vertical jump, bench press, squat.
This should be in the
They should be like alcohol tolerance. Like their ability to like shoot threes and free throws, like while incredibly hammered. And then that'll just kind of determine.
The question is, absent that drinking the day before, do we think they do better or worse? Like this is the crucial question: is he someone who there's a concept in psychology called desirable difficulty, which is the idea that sometimes people who are very good at something perform even better when you introduce some element,
like being slightly inebriated,
or just something to make it a little more difficult. Actually brings out the best in them. This could be desirable difficulty. He could have needed the mild impediment of a hangover.
Look, I know comics that are like a little that need a little bit of something to perform. But I mean, I don't know, like if that's a real.
The impediment doesn't have to be substance, right? Like
no,
it can be
of any
anything.
kind.
I think that's a very valid
Malcolm?
thing, and I would say in my own life, I can attest to that for sure.
It can force you to concentrate in a way you would never have concentrated. Like it's very hard to believe. Okay, so suppose he's just sleeping in his hotel room the day before. Right. Do we really suppose he would have had an even better game the next day? It's hard to believe he could do better than 45.
You mean like rested and hydrated?
Yeah, rested and hydrated. Do you really think he would have scored 60?
I mean, he did do 69 on the Cavs, right? So, I mean, he's very good at basketball, Malcolm. I don't know if you know that.
but there is a question because
I don't know. Like, I mean,
the doc aside, and I think the doc gets into this a lot, but it's just been he said it publicly, and it's been written about him a ton about how he very early on in his career, I think starting at Carolina, would basically put these chips on his shoulder, and a lot of times they were imaginary. So it would be a thing where it'd be like, you didn't shake his hand, or you shook his hand too late once, or something like that, and so he would be like, "Fuck JJ forever." You're racist, like things like that, just to get him mad. So maybe
Did you get a chance to play against him when he was on the Wizards? Did you get a chance to actually play against Michael?
No, I was a senior in high school. Yeah. To your point, I was reading something. This was again on my YouTube deep dive on Bulls clips in like 1998. A few days before they played in the Garden, Jeff Van Gundy, the Knicks coach, called MJ a con artist.
Oh yeah,
you remember this? I didn't have any recollection. He friends, takes them out for dinner, makes them seem nice, and he goes and kills them on the court.
Yeah, but I believe
and so that night he had 51 at the Garden and was cursing out Jeff Van Gundy after every play.
Jeff Van Gundy's a real one.
He didn't back down after the game. I read the New York Times article. He was like, no, I stand by what I said.
When you see the way he hung on to Alonzo Mourning's leg during that brawl, you know Jeff Van Gundy's a real one.
He's for real.
He's for real.
What do you think? How do you think your game would have been different if you were playing in that era?
Just spot up, wait on the double team, spot up.
But you would like
a different game.
Would you have been? Would you be fighting people more? Like it just seems like it's a different. It was the energy was different. Everyone's friendly now.
Are you still playing at 35? 20 years ago?
Probably not.
You're more
modern science, pretty good. Yeah. Like what we know about recovery, pretty good. The thing that is different now, though, is like the way we have to move in space is a little different. You know, we have to cover more ground.
When you watch,
I watch old games, and I'm first of all, the defensive schemes make zero sense. Like I watched Jordan's 55-point game in the finals against Phoenix, and they were literally just opening up. And they had Tom Chambers at the rim, and he would just stand there like this, and Jordan would jump over him or whatever. So that's the one thing. I think the defense was different. Science, but I think Like,
what about the raw athleticism?
It's better now.
I mean, like when I see that's just my guess, and I don't know if it's 1080p, but when I see Russell Westbrook take off, God. I'm like, this is insane.
Yeah,
this dude hit the turbo button always. Yeah, it's like he's like circle, circle, circle always.
And you can't. By the way, you've got a lot of times 4 shooters around him, no one in the paint, and you can't hand check him. Whereas like in the 90s, you always had 2 bigs. You could hand check. Like it was just way different.
Well, you could hand check, or you could just knock him on his ass. And just be like, you're not coming in here again.
But I think just me observing the speed of the change of direction, all that stuff, I didn't really see that when I was growing up in the 90s. Like if you look at the way Kevin Durant is like built like a pterodactyl, and if he crosses over, he's covering like 20 feet.
Yeah.
I don't know if guys really could move like that. Like even a guy like Garnett who
what are people supposed to do about Giannis physically?
Like what the Warriors tried to do last night, which is basically put 4 people in the paint and make the other guys beat you. Like you can't.
You literally just can't do anything. So it's like someone else has to.
There's like very few. I mean, honestly, and this is part of the reason I think Philly got Horford was because there's 1 or 2 guys in the league that can maybe slow him down. Maybe. No one can slow down Harden one-on-one.
Do you think the thing that allowed you to have such longevity in your career is more mental or physical, or your style of play?
Probably mental.
Really?
Yeah. Mental, yeah.
What do you think, Malcolm?
You're asking me to comment on?
No, not my career. On you. Yeah. You've had a long and illustrious career.
Yeah.
Well, it's certainly not physical, is it? I'm much interested in your in all of this. It's clear people are working, if not harder, certainly smarter now. But what does that mean in a practical? Like 30 years ago, if I'm an NBA player, what am I doing on my off day? Anything at all?
30 years ago, you were flying commercial.
Yeah.
So you'd play the game, and you can't sleep after games. So then you'd have to be on the bus at, let's say, 4 or 4:30 for the first flight out. Even on a back-to-back, you were doing this.
Yeah.
So that was different. I think, even my rookie year, we probably had 4 off days the whole season. Wow. We would get home from Indiana, fly back to Orlando, 2 a.m., practice at 9:30 the next day, 10 a.m., whatever it was. So you don't practice as much now. That's a huge thing. I mean, I've practiced, I don't know, since the season started, maybe like 5 times this season. And that's combined probably more than I practiced in the last 6 years. I played for Doc Rivers for 4 years and Brett Brown for 2, and we didn't practice. That's a huge thing. And then also, I'm going to say supplements, but I'm on natural supplements. But, everything you put into your body now, all the science they have behind that is huge. It's huge. You need to do a book on this. On how guys like Tom Brady are able to do this into their 40s, or Vince Carter. I mean,
Tom Brady's the one I worry about, because the one he can keep every part of his body healthier except his brain, right? So it's like I worry that he's going to be impaired in some way neurologically 15 years from now.
How many concussions? Does he take that many hits though? He doesn't get killed, right?
I mean, how can you not? There's
certain QBs that get killed. He's always had great protection.
He's been playing organized football now for he's 42, probably since he was 10.
Yeah.
So for 32 years, he has had his, and it's not just. I mean, remember it's not the number of concussions, because concussions are not the problem. It's the subconcussive impact that's the problem. So, and there's a wonderful bit of research that just looked at the correlation between CTE and the amount of years of football that you have played. And it's a straightforward linear correlation. The more years you play, the greater your chance of coming down with CTE. So I don't care how many hits he's taken. He's played for 32 years, right? You're at this point.
Did you play football growing up?
No, I wasn't allowed to.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Did you?
No.
I don't know. I actually played at UNC. I played a little.
Okay.
Did you really? Yeah, I was okay. I wasn't very good.
All right, we have a hard out here, so we're going to finish up. Guys, thank you for coming on the podcast. Really appreciate it. Great conversation. Thank you so much.